I was walking around in that new parking lot that you see out the window, and I saw this head sticking out a window and this pigeon right next to the head. And I thought, oh my God, I have to get that. So I yelled up to the guy and said, can I come up and take some pictures? And he said, sure, come on up.
Hello there. An interviewer suggested that Sohier's superpower was her ability to capture a deep level of intimacy within a very short period of time in which she interacts with her subjects. Now that's true, but we need to take a deeper look as to how she achieves that result. She's got a unique talent for being able to quickly gain people's trust, put them at ease, and then somehow diminish her presence. When you look at her photographs, often of groups of people, you notice that her subjects appear genuinely preoccupied with activities unrelated to the camera. Anyone who's photographed strangers will know that there are a number of challenges that need to be overcome. Firstly, one has to break out of one's own comfort zone and attempt to enter the private space of a stranger or strangers. Having achieved some form of access, one is then often confronted by blank looks as they expect you to somehow take control of the situation or pose them or tell them what to do. So inevitably their actions look unnatural or forced, and the pictures bear no relation to reality. Sohier gives us some insights into how she interacts with people, but it still doesn't explain how she achieves such consistent, relaxed authenticity.
You know, I got better results, I guess, with asking permission in the end. That's really what it's about. I just feel more comfortable with it. It's just when I started photographing, I certainly tried to do candids. It was very hard for me to get anything doing candids because I would feel I couldn't be aggressive enough without asking permission to get close enough to people. I could collaborate with people. I could ask them to do things or to, so there was something that enabled me in a way by asking permission. I mean, when I'm photographing people outside, I don't stay too long. It's different. It would vary between staying with people for, a couple of minutes to staying with them for maybe 20 minutes, something like that. And,
Right.
the larger the group, the more you can kind of fade into the wall and be a fly on the wall. So if you're only photographing one or two people, they're more self-conscious. So you have to be more careful how long you stay, I guess.
The photographs in Nan Goldin's The Ballad of Sexual Dependency or Danny Lyon's Bike Riders were created in a situation in which the photographer and the subjects are part of a closed group. Everyone is comfortable with the photographer being present and trust is being established. So they're not overly aware each time the photographer lifts the camera. Sohier, on the other hand, is entering a closed group that she's often just met on the street. And she manages to extract a level of natural intimacy which is remarkable. Sometimes the people in the photograph seem unaware of the camera, while in other instances, one or two are interacting with her in an easy manner.
This is in Cambridge, teenagers on the sidewalk. I was kind of interested in this hybrid approach of the pictures look natural. I mean, these teenagers on the left all look like they're going about their business, interacting with each other. But the girl on the right is looking at me, and so she's including me as a character in the picture. Of course, with a wide-angle lens, you don't really know what people think, and they don't really know exactly what you're including in the frame. This is in Pittsburgh. And again, I'm really interested in the girls on the right who are interacting with me. And yet the rest of the frame, really seems like just a street scene that's very kind of natural. So again, it's like this sort of strange hybrid of a candid, almost candid street scene, and something that's different, that's more interactive and more collaborative.
The photographs in her two books, American Scene and Passing Time, were taken between 1979 and 1985. But the books were only printed over 30 years later. In those days, time moved a lot slower. It was before screens took over, and the lack of air conditioning forced people, especially the young, onto the streets. Mostly everyone was a bit bored and waiting for something interesting to happen. People were less hyper self-aware and were more likely to spontaneously engage in activities. Sohier describes the interactions that she managed to capture as a kind of relaxed sensuality. She acknowledges that it can be awkward intruding into others' personal space, but she thinks her enthusiasm became contagious, and this somehow allowed her subjects to relax and be themselves. She was obsessed with making the best complex pictures that she could, and she genuinely loved the challenge of working with strangers until something intriguing emerged. Now, this may add to our understanding of how she was able to achieve this level of spontaneity. Most photographers in these situations want to get their picture as quickly as possible in order to end the awkwardness of the interaction. But being able to relax within the space opens up the possibility of collaborating with the subject in an informal manner. The other thing that strikes one about her photographs is that they are highly complex, layered by different interactions and activities that are being played out within the frame. What's going on around the subjects is significant and connected to the people that she's photographing. She says that this was a conscious strategy. She wanted the viewer to be able to see and be involved with every detail within her photographs.
I think I like the challenge of putting as much in the frame as possible, as many people, interesting environments. It was like this challenge. Can I do it? And can it still work? Because it tends to fall apart if you try to do too much. But also I was really drawn to environments. And when I was driving around towns or driving around the country, I would see that background and I would think, wow, that's really interesting. Maybe I can find people and have that as a background. So I like the idea of layering the pictures so that the idea was people in their environments. The environments were almost as important as the people, to my mind. This was in East Boston. I was driving around and I saw this young man in his above ground pool, and I went up to this little gate and said, could I come in and take some pictures of you and floating in the pool? And he said yes. And I guess, I ended up really liking seeing what was across the way, this sort of industrial wasteland across the river there. And it's such a strange picture because it's so tranquil and, summer, the pleasures of summer. And yet right across the way is this industrial landscape, which doesn't look so wonderful. This was in Lawrence, Massachusetts, one of the mill towns that I like to photograph in. And I saw this couple coming across the tracks, and, I loved that brick mill building in the background and the smokestacks and the American food sign in the background and the tracks themselves. And of course, I love the couple's plaid pants.
She always used an aperture between f11 and f22 to extend the depth of field so that she could achieve her aim of creating richer, more complex stories. One of her main influences was Diane Arbus. She was looking for the same level of psychological insight, while at the same time providing viewers with some context. so that the surroundings would become part of a subject's story. The textbook definition for this type of photograph would be environmental portrait. But then again, a picture of a butcher standing inside a butchery would also fall into this category. Sohier talks about her technique, including the incorporation of fill-in flash.
And these were all done with a Fujica 6x9 centimeter camera and 120 film, medium format film, and a wide angle lens, the equivalent of a 28 millimeter lens. And it was handheld camera with flash on camera. So I used a lot of fill-in flash in many of these pictures. And this is in Fall River, Massachusetts, one of the industrial mill towns that I like to photograph in. And here you can see the effect of the flash, filling in the foreground, the little girls in the foreground. And it allows you not to blow out the background. You could still see the detail in the sky. And this is in West Virginia. And I started to really like one of the things that the wide angle lens did. Really calls attention to scale and how that toy truck looks almost the same size in the frame as that real life trailer in the background. And I really like that about wide angle.
The pictures were first published in 2017 in the book American Scene. There had been growing interest by collectors in her vintage prints, and she was also aware that enough time had passed to allow the pictures to take on the form of a portrait of that era. The work wasn't published earlier mainly because her main focus at that time was taking pictures, and she would just quickly move on from one project to the next. During lockdown, she went back through her negatives and contact sheets from this period and discovered many images that she had never printed before. The best of these were collated into a follow-up book called Passing Time. The strength of this book shows how tuned in she must have been during this highly productive 7-year period. Vanity Fair rated it as one of the best photo books of 2023. In the late 80s, she produced a very different body of work, but it maintains the same level of intimacy. At that time, the gay community wasn't widely accepted, so couples generally had to keep their relationships secret. It was a particularly personal project for Sohier because it was largely inspired by her father, who was gay. He never actually fully acknowledged or confirmed it, but when Sohier showed him this body of work, he was particularly moved. He was a World War II vet who, after separating with Sohier's mother, started having closer relationships with men. The images have a wonderful ordinariness about them. Unlike a lot of more recent work on the subject, these images accentuate a sense of sameness within all human relationships. For the past 17 years, she's worked in color, and her projects have gained a more conceptual framework. She tends to work a little closer to her subjects, and there are generally less people in her pictures. But she remains interested in many of the same things. In making portraits that are psychologically complex and exploring the subtleties of relationships. Her project Witness to Beauty was shot close to home. For a brief period, her mother had been a model photographed by Richard Avedon and Irving Penn. Once she was also on the cover of Life magazine. As a child, Sohier used to lie on a bed with the dogs and watch her mother try on clothes and study herself in the mirror. As she grew older, she gave up trying to compete with her mother and was happy to remain behind the camera. Sohier became more focused on this project when, in her words, age began to challenge her mother's air of timeless perfection. The images are poignant not only because they reveal a personal drama, but we as viewers are also required to face the impact of aging. Some of these pictures are recreations of old family snapshots from a childhood, but most are collaborative, made with a tripod and self-timer. On one level, this is a series about her mother as she ages, but it also allowed Sohier to delve into their mother-daughter relationship and examine how having a beautiful mother impacted on her own sense of self. Animals have always been a part of Sohier's life. She grew up with 4 dogs and now lives with 3. I'll run some images from her series Animals. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah, animals, I guess I photographed the black and white animals work in the early 90s. Photographing animals is extremely hard, but it's so much fun. And so it's like, I think I shot more for that project than any other project. Lots of rolls of film. There's a lot of near misses with animals where you really, you're using a flash and they're moving and you're moving, and it's very, very difficult.